Okay, so I haven't been the most motivated person in the world lately. But out of that came something interesting. And we're going to take a look at an older Dell laptop that I already had that for some reason I've never really ever tested. So you've seen me do a couple of laptops on the channel and a couple other older pieces of hardware like a Dell Optiplex or something like that, even the Xeon processor most recently. When I was in the middle of doing that, I had kind of gotten frustrated and I was like in a foul mood. We'll just put it honestly. I wasn't feeling motivated. And so I broke out the laptop and started working on blogs and stuff like that in the living room. By the way, ThatPaulGuy.tech for my tech-related blog and buymeacoffee.com for my non-tech related. I'll link both of those in the description. Easy way to help the channel, go to Buy Me a Coffee and just buy me a coffee. I mean, yeah, that'd be cool, you know? In any case, I was writing blogs and I realized I hadn't used this laptop in a while and haven't really set it up or done anything. There was a couple of annoying things about it. That, first of all, the sound driver, I kept getting this little clicking or popping sound occasionally, and it was just annoying. And instead of upgrading the drivers or updating the drivers, I just chose not to use the laptop. The other thing was very early on in the process when I was trying to do some upgrades, like put an SSD and more memory in it, I managed to break the little tabs off the bottom cover. And so the bottom cover won't stay on without tape. And tape is messy. And yeah, so sometimes the bottom cover tries to fall off and I just like, you know what? Don't want to bother with it. In this case, however, it was the most convenient thing for me to do. It kept me out of this office area, which was at that point kind of driving me a little bit crazy. And I was able to go ahead and start, I was able to work through pretty well and realized I never really had done anything with this laptop. Now, I used it when I was going to school. I did, but it's 5 years old. It's a 2008 model Dell Inspiron 15 7567. Comes with an i5 7300 or 7300 HQ, 4-core, 4-thread processor. It's got a GTX 1050 in it, 4 gig, and then it's got the SSD, 16 gig of memory, 16 gig of DDR4 memory running at 2400 speed. Upgraded the SSD in it, so it's got a 512 there, and it also has a 1 terabyte regular notebook drive. Now, when I decided to go ahead and do the testing, all this stuff, testing this against the other computer, I did use a 2 terabyte SSD external drive, so I didn't have to load or unload anything or just swap anything on the laptop itself. The thing was, what did I want to test it against? What did I want to look at it in comparison to? My first thought was to compare it to the Optiplex that I was just doing, but that was a 4-core 8-thread. We already know that being compared is a little bit unfair because I can stretch its legs with that one. It's not confined to a space, and I can put better video cards and get much, much better results, and most of the time getting well over 60 frames per second with that. So the next best thing was what I was comparing that to, which was the Dell Optiplex in the first place. 4-core, 4-thread. It's an Optiplex 3020 SFF or small form factor. It's got an i5 4760 or 4670 in it. 4-core, 4-thread. And I went ahead and used the numbers with the RX 560, which was out about the same time as the 1050. And I'm not going to say comparable, but within reason. Not too bad in any case. 16 gig of memory running at 1600 speed DDR3, so there's a little bit of a difference there, but not enough to make that big of a difference, I wouldn't think. After all, the Xeon processor did very, very well with DDR3 memory. And then again, we're using with 512 of SSD. So fairly comparable or comparable on paper, and they look pretty close. I don't have the RX 560 anymore. It had older drivers when I tested this about a year ago with this setup. I've since given that card away. So I chose not to update the laptop's drivers yet either. So I kept them the same drivers they had for the past, 11, 12, 13 months. Which, turns out it works out okay. Now, there is a little caveat we'll talk about later having to do with drivers. But for now, we're testing what should be fairly apples to apples. And the first thing we're going to start with is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where I always start with that. And I kind of jump right into the benchmarks here. But we're talking about a significant difference here. We're talking about a good 40 to 50% jump in a title like this. It is very playable, no problems at all. And I think with a title like this, especially something that is not a first-person shooter, it's not action-packed, even on 1080 high where you're doing 30 frames per second or something, it works great. I was a little surprised to see 36 frames per second on high and medium, but, sometimes you get that. Borderlands 3, we're talking about another big jump, and in this case, it's starting to look a little bit like a pattern, but we've only got 2 examples, so kind of follow me here. Again, we're seeing a pretty decent jump. I keep Borderlands 3 at DX11, so it's easier to test. It's one of the 2 or 3 titles that are not on DX12, so I try to mix it up a little bit and kind of see how we're doing there. Far Cry 5, I had to go back and test Far Cry 5 instead of what I'm testing now, Far Cry 6. I did test that as well, but I didn't have numbers for Far Cry 6 for the RX 560. So testing Far Cry 5, and you're going to see this is also a DX11 title, and I also did the same thing with Forza Horizon 4 as opposed to Forza Horizon 5. I am testing the newer games now with newer setups, but because this was an old set of numbers and drivers to match, I wanted to go ahead and make it as fair as I could. Far Cry 5, like I said, is pretty much looking like the other 2, and we don't have much of a race. Forza Horizon 4, things did change a little bit. This is on DX12, and it was closer. So it was a little bit of a better difference, and in this case, we could put this pretty much all day long, and it plays well at 50 plus frames per second. It looks really good at 1080 high. 1080 low still looks pretty good, and you get that magic 60 frames per second, so life is pretty good. Both of these systems ran at 60 frames per second with 1080p low. The good thing about that laptop is it does have a 1080p screen. It is an IPS screen, so I was able to test at this full resolution. I didn't have any kind of upscaling or anything like that I had to try to do. World War Z is on the Vulkan API, and again, we see a difference here. It's not quite as much as in some cases, but it is around 20%, 18-20%. So still a pretty big lead for the laptop over the older Optiplex system, which at this point, I'm beginning to be a little bit surprised. Now, I do get much, much different numbers when I put the RX 6400 in there, but that's a brand new GPU, not brand new. It's a newer GPU, and that wouldn't be a fair test to test against this laptop. And Horizon Zero Dawn, there's a reason why I put this test in here. There's a reason why I call it the great equalizer. And that's because, yes, these numbers are right. Sometimes it is confusing. And I have no idea why. Sometimes I will get things that do not seem that they would match up, and they test out evenly. And then in a case like this, the old Optiplex actually beats the laptop. All these are on default settings. None of these have any resolution enhancements or anything like that. Just straight whatever the default was to test is what I did. So in this case, Horizon Zero Dawn saw a pretty big lead for the Optiplex, trying to tell me that yes, there's hope. I mean, there is hope for that older Optiplex, but we kind of already knew that because it was it has run AAA titles and other games pretty well. I haven't had any kind of issues, and I was able to prove that even on some titles like Battlefield or on Modern Warfare or something like that, it still runs pretty decent. Not great, but pretty decent. In this case, between 30 and 50 frames per second for the most part. If you lock this down at 30 frames per second, maybe did a little bit of resolution enhancement, maybe it's even better. But still, I mean, a console experience for most part, a lot of older consoles were all at 30 frames per second, so it's not horrible. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a DX9 title. This is our esports title, and we saw a pretty big increase for the laptop. It's kind of surprised me a little bit that the laptop would be this much better, 50% better. But hey, it is what it is, right? So 100 frames per second is still awesome. It's still great for a first-person shooter. You're still not going to have any problems. This is at 1080p high. I'm sure at 1080p low it would be even better. But I mean, if you can run it at high at 100 frames per second, might as well. And the laptop did really, really well. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And I did not, even though now I test games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Cyberpunk, and a few others, I did not add this into these testings because I didn't have numbers for the 560 on this. I do have numbers for some of the other things like the 6400, but again, I didn't think that was a fair comparison. But what about those games that do have FSR or something like that? Would the 1050 that's in the laptop do okay, do any better? And the answer to that is within reason, yes. And one of those examples is Cyberpunk 2077. Even though I didn't test it against the 560 in this case, we still get to take a look at it. I tested it at 1080p high and I tested it at 1080p low. And 21 frames per second for high became 27 frames per second, which is a pretty decent increase. And then the 1080p low went from 28 to 37, so very playable. So I think, and this was on performance, so I went ahead and did FSR, it's FSR 2.1 on performance, and I got a pretty good bump for both of them, putting that FSR setting. So maybe the way to play this game is to lock this thing down at 30 frames per second, maybe even lower the crowd density or something like that to see if you can't squeeze a little bit more out of it. Lock it down at 30 frames per second, play it on 1080p low, and for this laptop, it works great. Now, this doesn't answer the question what I'm going to do with this laptop. One thing I did do is I upgraded all the drivers. I got rid of that popping sound that was annoying the crap out of me. So that's all gone now. I did upgrade the drivers. I got a little bit higher scores, video frames per second wise, which is probably a big help. Some of these games, again, especially some of the newer games like Forza Horizon 5, Far Cry 6, even Cyberpunk and Assassin's Creed Valhalla and stuff like that, run a little bit better, probably a good 3 to 5% better with the updated drivers from NVIDIA that I did have before, or the ones that I did not have before that I do now. And of course, all the regular, there was a BIOS update and sound card, network card, and all that stuff that had updated drivers for this laptop. They stopped full support of this laptop in 2019. So that's still 4 years ago, about the same time as when I bought it 5 years ago, almost right about this time of year. It was March of 2018. So does it hold up pretty well 5 years? I don't know. 5 years in computer is sort of like dog years, isn't it? The whole reason I stopped using this laptop is because it wasn't practical. I didn't need it anymore after my move and the job I've got now. They provide me a laptop even here at home. And I've got a bigger setup to edit with, or I take Danny D with me, my small form factor. So I take him on the road, even though sometimes I do take the laptop with me. I very, very seldom ever break the laptop out and start using it. Maybe now that I've updated the drivers, I will. But it also kind of makes me wonder, I was thinking maybe I just wanted to get a new laptop because I didn't like my old laptop anymore. But maybe updating it and kind of getting the bottom panel and all that stuff, maybe that's really all I needed. And I guess we'll have to see if I even need the laptop at all. I don't know. I do notice there's a couple of them sitting around here that are older and I've tested, but they never were up to a standard that I wanted to take them on the road with me or anything like that. This has always been a pretty good workhorse. Maybe I just need to clean it up and fix it up a little bit. Who knows? And now I'm starting to ramble, so it's time to end it. In any case, folks, I just figured I would go ahead and share what I've been doing, what's going on. There has been an absence on the channel lately of me. Yes, that is totally my fault. I got bogged down with some other things that have not gone well, like that white case that's up there. I'm trying to turn it into basically a storage server, and I'm having... we're not even going to share that right now. Frustrations. That's all we're going to say. Anyway, I will get back to it. The pink case has the Xeon in it over there. We've done some testing with it, but I've put entirely too much of that Xeon on the channel lately, and I'm not going to give everybody else the same burnout that I've been getting with that same computer. It's good. It's been fun to play with and all that stuff, but it's not something that I want to keep making content about. I will get some more content out there. Don't worry, it's coming. One of the things I want to try to do sooner rather than later, is I still want to look at Intel's Arc 750, I believe it is, A750. I want to look at one of those graphics cards, so I might lay my hands on one of those soon. We'll have to see. In any case, tune in to find out. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. Don't forget to hit me up on the other socials. I certainly would appreciate it, as I'm going to pour myself back into this and try to make sure that I'm getting back on a cadence and making good content, which is even more important. And if you don't do anything else, I ask you to do one thing, and I ask at the end of every video, and that's just be nice to each other. Be kind. Do something nice. Smile, wave, hold the door open, say good morning, say good evening, whatever the case may be. It doesn't hurt to be nice. It doesn't cost anybody anything at all just to say hi or smile. So if you don't mind, just throw one of those somebody's direction, okay? Until the next time when I will get knee-deep into something that I probably, get frustrated with, but that's okay because failure will become a part of this as much as success. And that's maybe that's even more fun to do a video on. Who knows? So until next time, folks, I will see you later.